Welcome to True Bill Talk, a podcast about the realities of being a prosecutor, challenges in the field, and how we can make our criminal justice system work better for everyone. My name is Alyssa Marquederi, and I'm the director of the Vanderbilt Project on Prosecution Policy, also known as VPOP, here at Vanderbilt Law School. Hi, everyone. So I don't have to tell you that the headlines these days are overwhelming. We have a federal government shutdown, ICE raids intensifying nationwide. We've got federal agents increasingly involved in local policing. And that last development has become especially relevant here in Tennessee. With the encouragement and support of our governor, President Trump has deployed the National Guard and multiple federal law enforcement agencies to Memphis. The Memphis Safe Task Force reportedly includes hundreds of officers from Department of Homeland Security, ICE, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Tennessee Highway Patrol. About 3 weeks in, they had made over 1,000 arrests. And whatever your views are on this controversial decision, it will undoubtedly impact the local criminal justice system. It means more stops and arrests, a higher jail population, heavier caseloads for public defenders, and, most relevant to here at VPOP, an influx of prosecutions that could strain the system for months, especially if a backlog develops. So we are so fortunate to be joined today by Steve Mulroy, District Attorney General for Shelby County, which includes Memphis. And in the midst of an intense period for his office, DA Mulroy took time to share how his team is managing the surge in cases and how the presence of federal officials is affecting his community. We're grateful for his insights, and I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, so normally I like to go through a guest's whole background, but since you're a busy man, I'm just going to ask you this one personal question, which is, how did you end up in Tennessee? Because I know you grew up in Brooklyn, you went to Cornell and William and Mary, but I don't know how you landed up in Memphis.
So I was in D.C. as a Justice Department attorney and also a federal prosecutor, but I wanted to become a law professor. And to become a law professor, you have to be willing to relocate. And so I got an offer from the University of Memphis to come and become a law professor. And I thought, well, I'd heard of Memphis, blues, barbecue, Elvis. Let's check it out. And here I am 25 years later.
All right, so I'm going to ask you all these questions about recent headlines, but I'm curious, frankly, based on the news, I think what people tend to think about when they think of Memphis is crime. And as someone who's been there for 25 years, I'd want to know what you'd like listeners to know about Memphis and what it is that you love about that city that you now call home.
Sure. Well, my family and I have been living in Memphis for 25 years, and we have not been the victim of a violent crime. I go to all parts of the city, and I feel safe. Like any large city, there are certain neighborhoods where, you got to be careful at night. I think especially if you're a woman alone. Certain neighborhoods, if you are going to be there at night, you want to just be careful or, be accompanied by someone. But I feel completely comfortable going to all parts of the city, including downtown and including Midtown. And so I think while I definitely have a serious crime problem, there's no minimizing that. It's a place where you can raise a family and have a great time. And what I love about the city is that it has every amenity, cultural or otherwise, of a major city, and yet everything is 15 minutes from everything else, and you don't really have to worry about parking, and traffic isn't really that much of an issue. And so really it's a hassle-free existence with all of the excitement and amenities and interesting things of a major metropolitan center.
So I'm going to talk about National Guard and federal agents coming into Memphis. President Trump had been talking about sending federal troops to Memphis. With our governor's blessing, he's done that. And so I came across a Tennessee Lookout article that said that I think it was 2 days ago or so. This article came out. Today's October 22nd. That over 4,000 traffic citations have been issued. and that's compared to 1,000 arrests, 206 firearm seizures reported by the U.S. Marshal Service. And interestingly, that article opens with an anecdote about a scene where a black man's car is being searched, and there are several federal agents doing this. And in the end, they didn't find anything, but they gave him a citation for a dangling uh, front bumper, I think it was. And so this type of mass traffic stops, I think, is the type of thing that you railed against when you ran. Um, and your current statements about the situation have been relatively muted. It's not like you've signed off on everything that's happened, but as an example, you said that you welcome federal support and assistance. I guess my question is, are you concerned about the idea of federal agents serving as a massive force to stop people and search their cars, often only to just release them with a citation?
Yeah, I am concerned about it. And, I guess you can characterize it as muted. I don't know. I think I've tried to be pretty clear from the get-go. I think it's possible for us to make distinctions. And what I think I have said publicly, and I'll say right now, is it is okay to welcome the assistance of trained federal law enforcement agents and not welcome the assistance of the military. Within the universe of assistance from the federal law enforcement agents, it's okay to welcome helping us serve warrants because we have a backlog of outstanding warrants, particularly if we're focusing on warrants for serious offenses. It's okay to welcome that and not welcome the fact that there seems to be a lot of traffic stops, particularly in black and brown neighborhoods, for equipment violations and expired tags and other types of things that are non-public safety related traffic stops. I think it's possible for me to prefer the one over the other, to welcome one without the other. Within the area of immigration, I think it's okay for us to welcome the deportation of those undocumented persons that have significant criminal histories, while not welcoming what seems to be happening a lot, which is that law-abiding citizens who have been paying taxes and working and contributing to the economy for decades without incident are being deported, stripped away from their families. That doesn't necessarily, in my view, contribute to public safety in Memphis and Shelby County. So, I think it's possible to welcome the part that can be helpful and yet, lament the part that I think is not so helpful.
And so, to be clear, I think the first thing you said in your answer was distinguish between federal troops and law enforcement. But I guess what I want to be clear is it's the people who are conducting these traffic stops and issuing citations. My understanding is they're not troops, but they're
Correct.
Homeland
Right. That's what
Security and I think
yeah.
FBI, if I remember from
Yes.
the article right.
Yeah, so no, we've got, right, no, FBI, DEA, ATF, even some IRS agents of all the alphabet soup agencies have come in. And so what I just said was it's okay to welcome the federal law enforcement agents, but not the military troops within the universe of what the federal law enforcement agents are doing. I think it's okay to welcome the warrant service, particularly if it's warrant service on violent or other serious offenses, but not so much celebrate the mass traffic stops to the extent that the mass traffic stops are focusing on non-public safety related issues like equipment violations and expired tags. And now I've taken a look at the data, and really by far what seems to be happening is these traffic stops are turning into immigration arrests. When you take a look at all the different offense categories, not lawfully present in the United States really stands out as being the greatest of those. And so, a lot of this ends up being immigration stuff.
So tell me about this like the idea that it would be helpful to have federal agents serving warrants. So we're talking people who have a bench warrant, they have an open case, and they haven't shown up to court. So is that an issue that's just been a longstanding problem where you have tons of people out on open warrants for
For a
violence?
long time, well before my time in office, we've had a backlog of thousands of outstanding warrants. Now, you raise a good point. within the universe of those outstanding warrants, I would prefer that our assistance be focused on warrants for serious offenses as opposed to a failure to appear. Um, I mean, I think it's possible to make distinctions.
So, what has been the impact of federal law enforcement in Memphis? I saw there's been a 200% increase in daily arrests. So, and I know that you proposed the idea of having night court. So clearly, your office is already feeling the impact of these
Hmm.
cases.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just curious, how have you instructed prosecutors to handle the cases? I mean, are you seeing more cases with problematic stops and searches given what's happening? I'll start with that, with those two, is how you're telling your prosecutors to handle the influx,
Right.
until we
I
get
have not
night.
seen more problematic stops and searches necessarily. I have seen a much greater volume of cases, a significant, like 40 to 50% increase in our daily dockets. It's not gotten to the point yet where we can't handle it.
Mhm.
Months from now, could it get there? Yes, it could, but right now we're able to handle it. And in terms of what I've instructed my prosecutors to do, I've told them to treat these cases just like any other case. So whether the case comes to us from a regular law enforcement action from the Memphis Police Department or the county sheriff's office or anything else, or whether it comes from a federal task force action, we're going to treat them the same.
What types of cases do you think are dominating this? I think you just said 50% increase in your dockets. Are they low level? Are these really serious violent crimes? Like, what types of cases are you seeing coming from the federal arrests?
So from the federal task force, it is not the case that a majority of them are for violent offenses. I know there has been some confusion about that. It has been a mixture of different types of cases. Like I said, about over 20% of them end up being immigration cases that our office won't see. I think the next highest category for that would be assault. There are a fair number of vehicular offenses, so either reckless driving or driving with an expired license or um, DUI.
Sure.
There's a significant number of failure to appear warrants, like you mentioned, or probation violations.
Okay, so the assaults. So I understand where the vehicle cases are coming from. They're seeing expired tags, someone's weaving in and out of the road, so you get a DWI. How is it that that federal law enforcement are catching assault cases? Is it that 911 is, I just don't know the mechanics of how this works. I assume that they don't dispatch federal agents.
Right, right. So some of the assault cases are outstanding warrants for assault, where they've served the warrant and executed them.
Okay.
And then some of them are instances in which there is a traffic stop done, and then there's resisting arrest or something like that, and it leads to an assault
Mm.
arrest.
And how do you have any sense of what percentage of the overall cases are those, I guess you'd call it assault on a police officer?
No, I do not. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So you said, and I know this is all literally happening as we talk. So you said something like 20% immigration, which you don't see. And then how do you think the other 80% roughly are breaking down? I mean, you mentioned the assaults, the failure to appear, and then a lot of vehicle related crimes.
Right. Can we take a pause for a second?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'm not able right now to give you percentages, but what I can do is to tell you the rank order
Sure.
of the type of offense, right? So by far the biggest type of offense is immigration. Then I think after that it would be assault. Then there's a lot of illegal drug possession, illegal firearm possession. And then after that, I think it would be failure to appear, probation violations, and vehicular cases. So if you were to add them all up, violent crimes would not be a majority,
Right.
and the plurality would be immigration, but a significant number of them do involve assault or firearms.
And okay. So at the bottom you put failure to appear, probation violation, in vehicles, expired light or driving without a valid license, or say DWI.
Right.
And when you say illegal drug, are we talking small level possession for the most part, or large quantities?
That I don't know, but I would imagine that a fair number of them are just, illegal possession.
We're 2.5 weeks into this task force, so I'm actually impressed that you have this information at all, because you're also trying to run an office. So the idea that you have these numbers or even just a hierarchy is helpful. So thank you for that. Does it worry you? Is it, in your view, is it taking, or is this influx of cases, not all of which, but many of them are low level drug, probation violation, suspended license cases? Does it worry you that your assistants aren't able to focus on the shootings and the carjackings and those cases, because now you have this influx of, yes, some serious crime like assaulting a police officer, but it sounds like a fair amount. It sounds like a majority of low level cases, which you've made it your whole. I shouldn't say your whole, but your a big focus, right? Is prioritizing violent crime and not these low level offenses.
Obviously, I'd prefer if a higher percentage of the cases coming in as a result of the federal task force were violent offenses and more serious offenses. But, it's never been the case that we don't prosecute the low level stuff. We don't prioritize it. We may deal with it in different ways than we would the more serious offenses. And so we're able to deal with it. I guess what does concern me, Alyssa, is that the sheer volume of all of the cases is going to get to a point where it gums up the system. Our jail is already overcrowded as it is, and that's only going to get worse. Our dockets are getting bigger. And, I have already been for a while now been pushing my prosecutors to reduce time to disposition across the board. We just had a meeting yesterday. We have monthly meetings where we look at metrics about time to disposition and how we can improve those. And I do fear that that is going to get interfered with through the sheer volume of the cases, which is why I want to explore, which is why I think it would be useful if the state and federal governments that are providing all these traditional law enforcement resources could also provide us some resources on the back end on how to deal with it in terms of the courts and prosecution and dealing with the back end of it.
Right. Are you sending more cases, like guns and drug cases, to federal prosecutors? I know you have now, I'm not sure if he's actually sworn in, but I know U.S. Attorney Donovan was at least confirmed. So are you sending more cases to the U.S. Attorney's office?
Well, I don't really know if it's ever been the case that we send the cases. We meet weekly
Mm.
with our federal counterparts, and we take a look at all of the gun-related cases, and we decide which ones they'll take and which ones we take. But really, we're the default recipient, right? Unless A, there is a federal nexus, and so it legally could be taken federal,
Right.
and B, the U.S. Attorney's Office decides to take it.
Right.
Unless both those things are true, it all comes to us. So, as a practical matter, 80 to 90% of these cases are going to have to be handled by my office. Only a small percentage are going to be able to go federal. And I
I
know
just
there's
wasn't
been a lot of talk about them taking as many cases as possible federal, but I still don't think that's going to be more than 10 to 20%.
right. Although, from what you're describing, 10 to 20% would still be helpful, given that you're
Sure,
inundated.
sure.
So how do you expect things to go after National Guard and all these federal agents have left Memphis? I mean, are you concerned that the influx of law enforcement is going to damage relationships between neighborhoods and local police? Because now there are more of these traffic stops with people, kind of like that person in the article, the anecdote where this person was pulled over and his car was searched for, 45 minutes, only to find nothing but a citation for a bumper. Um, or do you think the benefits of having federal law enforcement is going to outweigh the downsides?
Boy, that's a really good question, Alyssa, and I don't know. One thing I am for sure concerned about is the effect of this surge on the Latino and immigrant community. They are terrified, really. And, I have always been a proponent of the idea that local law enforcement should not get involved in immigration enforcement, that there really should be a separation because we want the Latino and immigrant community and friends and family of those communities to feel completely comfortable cooperating with us. We want them to report crimes, provide tips, serve as witnesses, continue to serve as witnesses throughout the case. And we have been seeing some anecdotal instances of people freezing up and not showing up because
Is
of
ICE
that.
in your courtrooms?
No, not that I know of. No. But nonetheless, the immigration enforcement has ramped up to the point where the Latino and immigrant community is very, very concerned, very, very afraid. I was just at a community meeting night before last. A packed house, people very, very concerned about this. And, as a result, we suspect that there are probably, domestic violence incidents that are not being reported, crimes that are not being reported, witnesses that aren't going to cooperate. And that's a real issue.
Is there anything I have one last question. But is there anything else you want to talk about? And then I can ask that last question and then we can wrap up.
Well, I'll just say that, work proceeds apace. On the night court issue, we're currently looking at the idea of starting out with a pilot program of having some Saturday sessions. And if those are successful and it appears that the need is still great, then we might move to 2 or 3 nights a week just for like one extra shift, say from 5 to 9 p.m. So, we'll see how that goes.
And this would be for arraignments?
Yes.
And what about morale in your office? I'm sure prosecutors are not thrilled to be thinking about losing nights, let alone Saturday nights.
I think morale's still pretty high. I think people understand, the situation and understand they're going to have to step up. We are hoping that we'll get volunteers to work these extra shifts if they come up, and then reward that with some time off later on.
Okay.
So we think it's doable.
Okay, great. All right, last question. This is a hard one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you regret leaving your cushy professor job to be elected DA of Memphis?
Well, I'll put it this way. Because despite all the stress and all the frustration, I still get a lot of fulfillment in this job. I really do think we are doing well. We are making improvements, and the staff is really supportive, way more supportive than I expected them to be. So I would say most times of the year, I am down to the 2 or 3 level, but every May, when I realize that I'm not going to have my summer off, it shoots up to 9 or 10.
Oh, okay. Oh, 10. All right. Well, all right. So apparently your position may be available starting in May of 2026. Joking aside, you have so much on your plate. You're so busy, a lot of demands. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and to sort of give us a little bit more insight of what's happening in Memphis. Because, as outsiders, we see the headlines, but it's hard to really know what's happening. And so really appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
What strikes me most about what we're seeing in Memphis is how familiar this dynamic has become. Local police, sometimes with state and federal support, leaning on mass stops in the hope of catching a few violent offenders. To be clear, federal assistance in locating people with open warrants for violent crimes is extremely valuable. We need to prosecute those responsible for rapes, shootings, and homicides. And let's acknowledge that according to a recent news report, Memphis has seen a 47% drop in serious crimes compared to the same time last year, since the Memphis Safe Task Force began its operations. This is all obviously a good thing. But consider some other recent numbers in Memphis. More than 4,000 traffic citations were issued in just a couple weeks, alongside over 1,000 arrests. A significant share of those arrests appeared to involve immigration enforcement, driving with a suspended license, and low-level drug possession. Now, the task force did reportedly seize 206 firearms. If most of those came from the 4,000-plus traffic stops, that's roughly a 4% hit rate. It's not nothing, and I'm glad we have those guns off the street, of course, but it also suggests a substantial amount of time and resources are being spent on thousands of stops that yield minor citations, like a broken taillight. Research consistently challenges the efficacy of this cast-a-wide-net approach. The policing project at NYU, for example, found that traffic stops in Nashville do not appear to have a significant impact on long-term crime trends. Beyond effectiveness, we have to weigh broader costs. Stopping thousands of people to catch a relatively small number of offenders, often for minor infractions, can erode trust and cooperation, particularly in immigrant communities. When I prosecuted cases involving immigrant victims and witnesses in New York, especially those who are undocumented, we often had to reassure them that we at the DA's office were there to help them, not to trigger deportation proceedings. Otherwise, some of those victims or witnesses would no longer cooperate, and I would have to dismiss the case. Now, that was years ago before the current Trump administration increased immigration enforcement, which is only going to heighten fear among immigrants that coming forward could lead to their removal. And that would lead to fewer crimes being reported or prosecutors having weaker cases. Now, some listeners may accept this trade-off, but I think we need to be clear-eyed about the negative impact of intense immigration enforcement approaches on our justice system, especially those that come from huge numbers of traffic stops. Look, crime in Memphis is a complicated problem. We can't ignore the fact that there are violent criminals who must be held accountable and are out on open warrants. But I do want to pose you a question. Is deploying hundreds of additional officers to conduct thousands of traffic stops the best way to address violent crime, especially given the damage to community trust? A more targeted approach could be both effective and less costly. So, for example, we could just rely on a smaller number of federal agents tasked with finding people with open warrants for violent offenses. That strategy would likely yield a higher hit rate on serious offenders while conserving resources and minimizing harm. And we also have to think about the fact that presumably federal troops and this task force won't be in Memphis forever. So while their work may be reducing crime in the short term, it is certainly not a long-term solution. True Bill Talk is produced by Carrie Hayes from Coyo Strategies, Colin Nixon, Adam Grice, Estrella Lopez, Abby Delatre, and me, Alyssa Mark Hayderi. Many thanks to District Attorney General Steve Mulroy for his time in sharing how the Memphis Safe Task Force is impacting his office and community. If you want to email me a question, have an idea for a future episode, or want to send me your reaction to this episode, you can email me at alyssa.hayderi@vanderbilt.edu. Thanks for listening, and go do justice.